Hi, my name is Ibrahim Akın. I'm the founder of Geopolitical Compass, and here I'm going to talk about Chinese intention to develop the project called One Road, One Belt initiative, and the possible concerns when it comes to Turkey. Now, as we know, China has established a bank in 2013 with Bali, Indonesia, and itself, and called this Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. Then it has been enlarged to several countries. Now it's 24 countries. The intention of China to establish or to set up such a bank is to somehow bypass the standards and the procedure of IMF or World Bank because it doesn't fit to Chinese interest. And every time United States or European Union has the ability to halt the projects that China prioritize for its own national interest. That's why China has decided to establish such a bank in order to sponsor the projects that will enable them to carry them from China to likely to be European Union states. Now, why it is that? Because Chinese projections as well as IMF and World Bank projections indicate that in 2030 to 2050s even the European Union states will be or are going to be rich countries still, including the North America countries such as Canada, United States, even to most extent to Mexico. So for China to produce means to make the safety of all accessing all the raw materials from the countries to bring back to China, to produce them within China, and to logistically carry them from China to European nation states, including United States and Canada. So in order to make them, they need the roads and the railways. So how they are going to do this? China is a very clever country, so they have already realized that if they are going to do it with their own funds, it will be meeting with some resistance from the countries, because then it will be understood like a hegemony that they are trying to establish. So then they decide to do this bank. Now they are going to start all these projects. But whenever you look at the Asian bank, I would say Asian or AIIB bank, the vote shares are at least it should be 75% should be granted in order to endorse any project. Now, considering the 26.1 or 2% that China has the voting share, it means that China is basically saying that I am going to do whatever I want with these projects. I am going to endorse only the projects that I think it fits to my national interest. Now, why AIIB Bank is very much interested with other nations? Now, other nations, as of today, or most developing countries, as of today, are looking for funds. However, the United States has already decided to withdraw all or most of the printed US dollars during 2008 crisis, and they want to burn it, and they have already started, and since 2018 up until now, in a year, they have burned already 1 billion or over than 1 billion US dollars, and they intend to do this in 2019, as if I'm not wrong, a little bit less than a billion. They want to burn it more. It means that the US dollar is now decreasing. The demand is increasing especially by the developing countries, because the hot money has enabled them to have a prosperity, a decade, I will say, more or less, up until 2016-17. Now, whenever the US dollar is droning, the developing countries seek for US dollars, and China becomes very much popular in that regard. But China says, if you want my money, and then the project should be as I want, and of course they are going to do some projects that the other nations require for or seek for. However, the standards and the influence that the Chinese influence will be established in that countries. like the Truman Doctrine in 1940s or 45s after Second World War. They are also somehow following the similar path, like the United States. So China is saying, whenever you are going to do this, all these things, my companies will be there, my people will be there, and we will share the projects, and most likely it will be 50-50. But my interest will be granted by your laws also. So that makes and all the funds, since all the funds will be backed by AIIB, that decreased the resistance, but still it doesn't completely delete the fact that it's still a Chinese hegemonia on the country. Now, as of today, there are not many Chinese investment in Turkey, and Chinese investment, it will take place, I believe, in 10 to 15 years later, it will start showing its effect. Why I'm saying 10 to 15 years? Because at this moment there are more projects, I will say, within Kazakhstan, within Kyrgyzstan, within Turkmenistan, it will be, and a little bit in the, I will say, southeastern of Russia. The roads and the railway projects have already started. China already have invested hugely in Pakistan, since the Pakistan and United States relations are broken very much, and now they are going to do the TAPI, it's called the Turkmenistan, and then it will be the Iranian, and then it will go to the Pakistan pipeline for the natural gas purposes, which United States was very much against, but now it will be funded. Already Pakistan has decided to go for it now again. These already showing that whenever China is putting their money to these developing countries, which United States once at least had I would say, interest and influence on, the lack of US dollars or the power or enable those developing countries losing their ties with United States and the European Union, I would say, that it goes to the lap of China. Since it is already taking place, these projects will be granted later on. So China has already started to establish its influence in these countries. Why China wants these projects to happen? From A point to B point, if you need to carry your products and sell it in B countries, you need to have roads. Roads, it means the roads for the vehicles, and also a railway for the trains, and also maritime routes should be secured. Now, once I said this, I have to also explain that there are three main routes from China to European Union, especially. One of them is through the Russia to Baltic states, and Baltic states from the Northern Europe, it goes down to all the European states. One of them is from India, Pakistan, Iran, and then Turkey, and then it goes to Europe, to Central Europe directly. The other one goes from the Mekong Strait to Indian Sea, and Indian Sea to the Horn of Africa to Egypt, and from the Egypt it goes to the southern Europe. The best optimum route it will be the second one, especially for China. It's much more secure also, when there are still problems. But once we consider 10 or 15 years later what will happen, or what kind of concerns Turkey might have, is directly is related with at our projections. In 10 to 15 years time, Turkey's economy will be much more larger than today. The IMF and the World Bank projections already show that Turkey is going to be, if I'm not wrong, the 13th or the 11th biggest economy in the world, including the increasing population from 85 to 95 million, and the GDP parameters also will be increased. It's a huge development for Turkey. And if you think that now Turkey has also economic crisis and all these projections will be realized, It means that Turkey is going to show some kind of development in future, or has to. And, but Turkey's also influence, or Turkey's also national interest lays with the national interest that China has, especially from Pakistan also to I would say the Central Asian countries and North Africa, and also Horn of Africa. Turkey is now becoming a main interest, that Turkey wants to establish a strong and efficient interest or influence, let's say. Now, in 10 to 15 years' time, when China comes to Turkey and starts, let's say, establishing a good, I would say, trade partnership, Turkey might be reluctant to establish this, because it will not be within their or within Turkish interest. That's why I do believe that Turkey is not going to show too much interest to help China to develop these projects through its land, because Turkey is already doing all these roads, and roads is not a problem, and the railway is now under construction in Turkey, so there will be not many projects that China can also invest in Turkey. So why Turkey needs to open all these routes? Of course, they are going to open because of the trade and the international agreements, yes, but it's not still within their national interest. Considering that, also there is another concern or another threat to the United States and the European nation. Now, as we know today, Iran, and including also Russia, is a main threat to Europe, or Euroland, let's say. Now, considering this, they don't want to also see Turkey slide or going to that direction, and creating some kind of allies with Russia and Iran, including China as backed. Now, considering these four countries as a opponent to Europe, or threatening the European interests, it will be a huge threat to Europe. So, considering that also, once China is investing heavily in one country, they want them to support China in all manners. And this means especially the democratic institutions' effects will be loosened, and the countries will slip to more, I will say, a strict management style or administration style. And once Turkey goes to that path, and then it will be hard for United States or to Europe to take the support of Turkey. And for that reason also, I will see maybe after 5 years to 10 years later, United States and including the European Union is going to compete with China to try to keep Turkey allied with their interests. So I am believing that it will be a kind of a big crash between China and United States with regard to Turkey, and try to take their allies aside. And I would like to thank you. Thank you very much, and have a nice day.